Nie Xiaoqian. Long ago, in a time long forgotten, there lived a young scholar named Ning Caichen in Zhejiang province. Ning was known for his cheerful spirit and self-respect, and people admired him as a man of principle. One thing he often said was,
"In my lifetime, I will only love my wife and no one else."
One day, Ning traveled to a city called Jinhua for business. On the outskirts of the city, he came across an old temple. Aware that staying at an inn in the city would be costly, he decided to take his chances and seek shelter there. The temple buildings were imposing, but the courtyard was overgrown with wild grass. As Ning ventured down a dim corridor, he noticed many rooms that seemed to have been living quarters for monks, though all of their doors stood open, except for one, which was secured with a new lock. Surrounding here were ponds and bamboo groves, making it a quiet, serene place ideal for both living and study. Feeling pleased with the setting, Ning decided to wait there for the monks to return, hoping to discuss the possibility of renting a room. As dusk settled, a strong young man entered the courtyard and unlocked the only door with a lock. Ning quickly stepped forward, greeted him, and explained that he was looking for a place to stay. The young man laughed warmly and replied,
"I'm Nie Xiaoqian, you can call me Yin. There's no landlord here. I'm just staying as a guest myself. But if you don't mind the solitude, I'd be glad to have you as a temporary neighbor."
Ning was pleased to save on rent, so he chose an empty room and settled in. The room had no furniture, so he made a bed out of dry straw and used some wooden planks to create a table. He decided to stay there for the following nights. That night, the moon shone brightly. Unable to sleep in the unfamiliar surroundings, Ning lay awake. Suddenly, he heard low voices outside, distinctly female. Curious, he got up and stepped outside to investigate. The temple looked eerie in the moonlight, shadows of trees swaying with the breeze like dancing phantoms. Ning remembered that Yan's room was to the south, but the voices were coming from beyond the low wall to the north. Driven by curiosity, Ning peered through a small window in the wall. He caught sight of a middle-aged woman and an elderly lady deep in conversation. In the moonlight, the old woman's appearance was deeply unsettling. She wore a red dress that might once have been vibrant but was now faded, with garish, exaggerated ornaments in her hair. Her face was painted an unnatural, ghostly white like a corpse that had clawed its way out of a coffin. Ning heard the middle-aged woman say,
"Why isn't Xiaoqian here yet?"
"She should be here any moment."
The old woman replied with a chilling smile.
Has she complained to you at all?
"I haven't heard anything."
The old woman replied.
"But she does seem troubled."
The woman cautioned.
You must keep an eye on her. I have a feeling she isn't entirely loyal to you.
At that moment, a beautiful young girl walked in. The old woman laughed and said,
"We were just talking about you, and here you come, sneaking in like a little enchantress. Good thing we weren't saying anything bad. Look at you, you're so captivating. If I were a man, I'd hand over my very soul to you without hesitation."
The girl replied.
Only you would flatter me like that, madam.
Realizing it was rude to listen in on others' private conversation, Ning Caichen slipped back to his room and settled down to try to sleep. Before long, the entire temple had fallen silent once more. Just as Ning was drifting off to sleep, he suddenly sensed someone had entered his room. Startled, he sat up quickly, and to his surprise, saw the girl he'd heard called Xiaoqian standing there. Shocked, he asked her why she had come in. The girl simply smiled and said she wanted to stay with him for the night. Ning, keeping a serious expression, replied,
"If you're not afraid of people talking, I certainly am." A single misstep could ruin my reputation and turn me into someone dishonorable.
No one will know in the dead of night.
The girl tried to reassure him. But Ning scolded her loudly, and she hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. Growing more insistent, Ning shouted,
"Leave now! Or I'll call for the man in the room to the south."
The girl was a bit frightened by his words and reluctantly left. However, she quickly turned back, placing a gold ingot on Ning's bed. Ning immediately threw it out the door, scolding,
"Ill-gotten gains, they will only dirty my pockets."
Ashamed, the girl picked up the gold and left, muttering to herself.
What a heart of stone he has.
The next morning, Ning was about to ask Nie Xiaoqian if he knew whether there were any other people living in the temple. However, he was surprised to see Yen preparing to leave.
I had planned to invite you for a drink tonight, but something urgent has come up, so I have to head out now. It looks like we'll have to wait a few days.
Yen explained. So Ning decided to hold on to his questions and wait for Yan's return. The rest of the day passed quietly. In the afternoon, however, the temple received some new guests. A scholar and his servant came in looking for a place to stay. After exchanging greetings with Ning, they chose an empty room and settled in as well. The next morning, Ning was jolted awake by the sound of commotion outside. When he stepped out, he found a group of constables gathered at the door of the new scholar's room. From their urgent whispers, Ning learned that the young scholar had died mysteriously during the night. The scholar's body appeared normal except for a tiny wound on the sole of his foot, still trickling blood, as if pricked by a needle. Though his servant had been sleeping in the next room, he, too, had no idea what had happened during the night. With no other options, the servant began packing their belongings, preparing to return the following day to inform the scholar's family of the tragic news. But in a chilling turn of events, the next morning, the servant was found dead in his room as well. His body showed the exact same strange sign as his master, an otherwise unmarked corpse with a single small wound on the sole of his foot, still bleeding slightly, as if pricked by a needle. Just then, Yen returned. After inspecting the bodies carefully, he seemed deep in thought. Ning couldn't help but ask if he had discovered anything. Yen replied confidently,
This is the work of a ghostly creature.
Ning had never believed in superstitions, so he assumed Yen was simply making things up. But as night fell and darkness engulfed the temple, Ning, alone in his room, couldn't help but recall the strange deaths of the scholar and his servant. A chill ran down his spine, and he began to sense that this seemingly peaceful place might be hiding something dangerous, something deadly enough to cost him his life. Just then, he suddenly heard someone knocking at the door.
"Who's there?"
Young master, it's me. I have something important to tell you.
Came the soft reply. Ning recognized the girl as the one who had visited before. Gathering his courage, he opened the door. The girl looked at him and said,
I've met many people in this temple, but none as honest and principled as you. I don't want to deceive you. My name is Nie Xiaoqian. I died when I was 18, and my body is buried right next to this temple. Unfortunately, there's a powerful evil spirit here, and it has been using my body to force me into doing many terrible, immoral things. I used my appearance to deceive others, but please believe me, this was never something I wanted to do. Now, there's no one left to kill in this temple. The demon is likely coming to kill you.
Hearing this, Ning was terrified and begged Xiaoqian for help. Xiaoqian replied,
If you stay in the same room as Yen, you will be safe from disaster.
Ning was curious.
"Why don't you try to deceive Yen?"
He's an extraordinary person, ghosts and demons don't dare go near him.
"How do you go about deceiving people?"
When someone gets close to me, I secretly prick the sole of his foot with a small needle, causing him to faint. Then, I drain his blood to feed the demon. If someone can resist my beauty, I tempt him with gold, but it's not real gold. It's a kind of ghostly bone that, once kept by anyone, will eventually consume their heart and soul. These methods play on people's desires for beauty and wealth.
When do you think that ghost will come after me?
Tomorrow night. The evil is about to wake up. I have to leave now, or it will find me here.
Xiaoqian said, tears in her eyes.
I feel like I'm drowning in a vast ocean, with no shore in sight. You're an honorable man. I know you will help me. If you can take my remains and bury them in a peaceful place, I would be forever grateful.
Ning agreed to her request and asked where her grave was.
Remember, it's where you'll find a crow's nest in the poplar tree.
With that, she stepped out, disappearing moments later. The next day, fearing that Yan might go out, Ning went to his room early and invited him to drink together that evening. During the meal, Ning expressed his wish to share a room with him that night. Yan declined, saying he preferred peace and quiet. But Ning wouldn't take no for an answer. When night came, he even moved his bedding over to Yan's room. Left with no choice, Yan reluctantly agreed to share the room with him. Before going to sleep, Yan placed a small chest on the windowsill and then warned.
I know you're an honest man. But I have some personal matters I can't explain. Please, don't open this small chest. Otherwise, it will bring trouble for both of us.
Ning nodded respectfully. As the night grew darker, an invisible darkness slowly enveloped the only occupied room. Ning, who couldn't sleep, noticed a shadow creeping closer outside the window. Its eyes glowing with a blood-red light. His heart raced, ready to leap from his chest. Just as he was about to scream for help, a brilliant white light shot out from the small chest on the windowsill. It broke through the window and vanished in the blink of an eye. Yan seemed to sense something amiss. He got up, opened the chest, and carefully examined its contents. Taking out a small, shiny object, he held it up to the moonlight and gave it a sniff. It glimmered faintly, about 2 inches long, resembling a slender, elongated leaf. After a moment's inspection, he securely wrapped it up and placed it back into the chest. Ning couldn't contain his curiosity and asked,
What just happened?
Yin paused for a moment before replying.
Since we're friends now, there's no need to keep it a secret. I'm a swordsman. The object in the chest is my flying sword. It senses danger around me and acts on its own to protect me. Earlier, I caught the scent of a demon on the blade.
Can I see your flying sword?
Fascinated, Ning eagerly asked. Nie Xiaoqian nodded and took it out. It was a small, dazzling sword, gleaming brightly in the dim light.
If not for the stone railing blocking its path, that demon would have been killed on the spot, instead of escaping with injuries.
The next morning, Ning went outside to investigate and found a pool of foul-smelling blood on the ground. This discovery made him even more convinced of Xiaoqian's words. Determined, he searched the area around the temple carefully until he came across an overgrown graveyard. Sure enough, next to one of the graves stood a white poplar tree with a crow's nest nestled in its branches. Days passed, and Ning finished his business and prepared to return home. On the night before his departure, Yan hosted a farewell banquet in his honor. During the meal, Ning, deeply impressed by Yan's extraordinary swordsmanship, asked eagerly,
Could I learn your techniques?
Yan smiled and replied,
You have a good character, which makes you well suited for swordsmanship. However, I've observed your future, and it holds wealth and honor, not a life like mine.
With that, Yan took out a small sword pouch and handed it to him.
Take this as a gift. Keep it with you, and it will protect you from harm caused by demons.
Before departing, Ning went to the tree outside the temple, carefully dug up Nie Xiaoqian's remaining bones, and wrapped them in his clothes to take home. Once back, he chose a quiet spot near his study to bury her. He built her a small grave there, ensuring it was peaceful and secluded. Standing before the freshly made grave, Ning offered a heartfelt prayer.
You've been lonely for so long. Now I've laid you to rest beside my humble home. May we share each other's sorrows and joys, and may no other spirits trouble you again. This wine is simple and plain, but please don't disdain it. Drink, and let it bring you peace.
He then poured the wine onto the grave, as if sharing it with Xiaoqian's spirit.